Julia J. Posen, your host for this absolutely compelling discussion about the intersections of art and activism, and particularly how we can leverage this goodness to stand with Indigenous people in protecting the Amazon rainforest and the earth defenders who have called this place home for literally thousands of years. In addition to running my own social good company, steelstraw.com, I'm an organizer with the campaign Artists for Amazonia. Our work is about harnessing the power of creative and entertainment influencers to catalyze global action in response to the crisis that's happening. Together, we're advocating for the permanent protection of the Amazon rainforest. And on May 28th, we're holding an extra special live stream benefiting the Amazon Emergency Fund, featuring some of the biggest artists in Hollywood. So stay tuned for more details, and you can learn more at artistsforamazonia.com with the Young Entertainment Activists for their Hollywood Digital Climate Summit. And we so appreciate their leadership and creativity in bringing us all together. And that's exactly what we're here to talk about, leveraging creativity, art, and communities across the globe to align on common goals and stand together and advocate for our people and our planet. And now we're about to hear from a lineup of top-notch talent. These people have dedicated their lives to the creative and passionate pursuit of environmental and social justice. And what I find most fascinating about these people is how each one of them has followed a very unique path. Oftentimes our careers don't fit into a box, and I spent most of my youth filled with passion and moral clarity, but without a real sense of how to use my powers for good. But over the years, I've learned that activism requires creativity, leadership, and courage to rise above the policies and politics and what they may dictate to really fight for your truth. Well, that's what everybody today has done in very different ways. So without further ado, I'm so honored to introduce our panelists. I'm going to share their names and titles briefly, and then I'm going to give them the opportunity to share briefly about themselves. And don't worry, at the end of this live stream, there will be an opportunity to answer some of the questions. So just share those in the chat feature on Facebook. So we have Atossa Soltani, founder and board president of Amazon Watch. We have Leo Cerda, founder and project coordinator of the HUA Project. We have Asher Levin, who is the creative director for the Environmental Media Association. Then we have Tayana David, who's a co-creator of Circle of Wisdom. And finally, we have Stephen Starr, who is an organizer at Extinction Rebellion, Los Angeles, and a film producer. All right, so Atossa, would you do us the pleasure of sharing briefly about who you are and what you do?
So very briefly, thank you for having me on this program. It's a great honor to be here. Again, I have worked my entire adult life in the Amazon rainforest, working to protect the rainforest. So I was a founder of Amazon Watch, and now I'm the board president, and continue to be the global strategy director for an initiative called the Sacred Headwaters Initiative. And, basically we are organizing campaigns in defense of the rainforest and advancing the rights of Indigenous peoples. So it's a great honor to be here.
Awesome. Thank you for all of the work that you do. Leo, you are in Ecuador. You are literally in the Amazon right now. Share with us, who you are and what you do.
Hello. Thank you for having me here. My name is Leo Cerda. I am the founder of the HUA Project. We do advocacy, capacity building, and storytelling with Indigenous youth and leaders from across the Ecuadorian Amazon. And right now we are supporting the communities towards the emergency response for COVID. And I'm based in Ecuador, in the Ecuadorian Amazon, and I'm working mostly with youth and women across the Ecuadorian Amazon.
Such important work you're doing, and I'm excited to learn more about it as we go here. All right, Asher, share about yourself.
Okay, hi, Asher. I am the creative director at the Environmental Media Association. I've been working in several facets with the organization, along with other organizations like Amazon Watch and Sierra Club and a lot of other ones for many, many years, helping to create messaging through specific content creation, whether it be a PSA or a live action, or creating a social post moment, and working again with my friends over at the Artists for Amazon and Amazon Watch, and excited for EMA to be a part of all of this, and I can't wait to talk to you guys about what we're doing.
Awesome. Tayana, do you share a few words about yourself?
Thanks, Julia. Really nice to be here with my colleagues who I admire so much. So I'll start. As a teenager, I started getting into activism, particularly around Clayoquot Sound and protecting the Carmana Valley. I was, coming from dance class to a protest at the legislature. And it wasn't until years later I realized that we could combine art and activism to really harness the power of creativity, to tell stories in a new way, to engage people emotionally, to help communicate. I ended up getting a couple of degrees in theater in a very interdisciplinary way, acting and directing, playwriting. My master's is from a Buddhist-inspired university, Naropa, where we learned about Dharma art, which is about creating from an awakened state of mind rather than a place of neuroses. So that's something I always try to come back to, even when things get a little crazy in producer land. So that's my story. I'm now co-director of Circle of Wisdom, which is an online wisdom library. We interview Indigenous and other leaders from around the world and make their wisdom available in short form wisdom snacks.
Awesome. I love that you went to Naropa too. The more I learn about you, the more I like.
Cool.
Okay, and Stephen, please share a little bit about your work and who you are.
Sure. Thank you very much, and thanks to Ye for having us all today. It's great to be here. So I'm an organizer with Extinction Rebellion Los Angeles. Extinction Rebellion is a global climate emergency, ecological emergency network of 1,200 collectives all over the world. There are 80 countries involved right now, and we only started 16 months ago. We're moving very quickly for obvious reasons. My work started as a kid. I was a concert promoter in college. I got to hang out with Bob Marley and meet his family, and that dipped me for life. From that moment on, all of the work I did, and I chased Bob to William Morris. I ended up being an assistant there, rose up through the ranks, left running the film department in New York, and then went on to TV and film, mostly social justice, social good work, documentaries about water, urban farming, bunch of different online initiatives, indie media for Occupy, and to be here now today with this crew dealing with an existential crisis, it is a great privilege. We are really excited to talk a bit more about Extinction Rebellion Los Angeles, what an amazing crew we have, and what an opportunity it is for folks who are sitting on desks at agencies or production companies or streamers to come play with us. Thanks.
Awesome. So everybody on this panel, including myself, are all part of the campaign Artists for Amazonia. And, we're quite an eclectic bunch. Okay, so my first question is for Atosa. You've spent your life's work shining a light on Amazonian indigenous peoples, working with them to demand justice and sound the alarm for why the Amazon rainforest is crucial for our planet. Can you talk to us about why the Amazon rainforest is so vital for the survival of our planet?
Sure. It was, I think, the first week in college, I received a circular, a newsletter that was published by the by James Lovelock, the founder of the Gaia hypothesis. And that truly blew my mind. I really understood at that moment that the Earth is a living system, that it's not a rock, it's more of a living organism. and that it's basically interactive and interdependent. And from that epiphany, I began to really hear the call of the Amazon, and it permeated everything from my dreams to my waking daydreams, about how the world did not know about this vital organ of Gaia that was basically being dismembered and destroyed before we even knew what we were destroying. And so that was in the 80s, and it took me a while to figure out how I could make a difference. And eventually I started working with different rainforest groups. Now, science only now, through all of this Earth observation in the last 10 years, we're basically learning about the important role, how the rainforests are a vital organ of a living Gaia. So, people hear about the Amazon being the lungs of the world. And, science is starting to basically show that it's more like the heart of the world, the heart of the planet. Every tree in the Amazon, of which there are hundreds of billions of trees, lifts up 1,000 liters of water a day through evapotranspiration. Now, the combined effect of all of those trees lifting up moisture and vapor into the atmosphere create these flying rivers that basically summon the moisture off the Atlantic. Basically the trees lift up the water, and then the clouds bring it rain. So basically the cycle of hydrological cycle brings rain not only to South America, but the entire world. It is like the heart pumping blood through your body. The Amazon is pumping moisture and weather. NASA calls it the engine of the global weather system. And basically the whole hydrological system of the Amazon is massive. If you think about how big, if you take the Amazon River at the mouth of the Amazon River, the flow of the Amazon River, which is already bigger than the next 6 largest rivers on the planet combined. So just if you take the 6 largest rivers combined, that only equals to the flow of the Amazon River. Now, a river bigger than that is lifted by the forest into the atmosphere every day. So imagine that is the pump, the heart pump of the planet, and it's dependent on those trees. So the more we lose the forest, we've already lost about somewhere around 17 to 20% of the Amazon's already completely deforested. Another 20% is severely degraded. And the science says that sometime around the 25%, when we get to 25% of the forest being degraded or destroyed, we basically get into a tipping point, an ecological unraveling, where the Amazon would become a savanna. Eventually, over time, it would start to lose that forest, that hydrological cycle would collapse, which would affect, we know the hydrological system in the Amazon affects, is responsible for 50% of the snowpack in California, for example. So we know there's a direct linkage to agricultural productivity, to rainfall around, the Americas. And so, so basically the tipping point is here, somewhere between now and in 5 to 10, at most 15 years from now, that unraveling will be basically irreversible. We are at that stage now, and so it's important. That's why we're gathering to really campaign for the heart of the world. The other piece of this is that, and I know Leo's going to talk about it, being from the Quechua people, the indigenous people of the Amazon. There are 400 indigenous nations in the Amazon, and basically the Amazon is the way it is because indigenous peoples have been the guardians. And that's playing out. We were just beginning to understand that. Satellite imagery shows that indigenous territories are the best protected area. We also know that the Amazon is critical for carbon storage. Every tree's half carbon. So destroying the Amazon releases the carbon that's in the vegetation. Plus, the forest can't absorb the carbon that is currently absorbing from the atmosphere. So it will go from being a carbon sink to a carbon source. In fact, the biggest carbon bomb on the planet. So just in summary, the Amazon's vital organ, it's critical, it's at a tipping point, and without it, there is really a threat to life for the biosphere.
Oh, thank you for sharing. And it really speaks to how interconnected we all are, and how it's so important that we all stand together. Leo, love to hear from you. How is it like on the ground right now in Ecuador navigating the impacts of COVID-19? We understand that, indigenous peoples are particularly vulnerable to these impacts. Can you find responses that you're doing, and how is it down there?
Yeah, thank you. I think indigenous people are always at the forefront against the fight of climate change and for the protection of the planet Earth. And also, we are the most vulnerable people against this pandemia, such as COVID-19 and fossil fuel extraction and the institutional racism, because we don't have access to good health, to good education, or to good food. And the governments extract our resources and they have devastated our communities. We are seeing right now the response for indigenous communities. We need to have an adequate response, that we have to demand the governments to respect our indigenous communities, to stop illegal miners, legal loggers to come to our territories. We have activated emergency protocols for our own protection in our communities. A lot of communities have activated emergency centers. We are disseminating support across the Ecuadorian Amazon, giving our communities access to food, medical supplies, protocols in the 11 indigenous languages in the Ecuadorian Amazon. And we just created, together with NGO allies and indigenous organizations, the Amazon Emergency Fund. So the people can contribute, and that fund will be disseminated amongst indigenous people who are in most need right now. There are like 9 countries in the Amazon in South America. So we need adequate and a specific response to the specific needs of the people and the indigenous people who are protecting the forests. We know that the COVID-19 is the imminent threat right now, but right after this is well, we tackle this down. We need to see like what's coming after. A lot of the governments will try to come for our resources instead of rethinking and taking a step back and say, okay, this capitalism way of fossil fuel extraction is not working for us. We can see now the limits of globalization and the limits of capitalism. And right now, government should think about, okay, we should listen to indigenous people. We should keep the fossil fuels in the ground. We shouldn't be extracting our resources. We should protect and protect the protectors of the Mother Earth. So right now, yeah, we've been having different responses, and it's been a time that we're working together closely with local governments, with NGO allies, and with other indigenous people, so we can survive this pandemic.
Thank you so much for the work that you're doing and for helping to educate everybody else, what's really happening. And the art submission project that Yaz is hosting, the Amazon Emergency Fund is one of the beneficiaries of that. So, we're all doing everything we can to lend that support. On the note of relaying information, I want to talk to you, Asher, about basically it's the role of the storyteller who has the power to captivate an audience, to make them feel a sense of connection and urgency and meaning. Can you talk to us about how the Environmental Media Association approaches storytelling as a form of activism?
Sure, yeah. We were founded by storytellers. Our entire board are storytellers, whether they're actors or producers or writers or directors. And, we believe that the environment needs a voice, and that we supply that voice. Throughout the years, we've put plots into movies and television. We've obviously had have 2 annual events where we can promote our ideals, as well as celebrate leaders, both in the industry and also in the environmental community, and business leaders. This particular situation right now is a little complicated for us, but we look at it as an opportunity. We've recently officially launched a media network combining our Instagram and our YouTube, as well as all of our board members. We're looking at this like a traditional digital media company where, you know, it's not just the Green for Emma, go to @Green4Emma and subscribe, or the EMA online on YouTube. It's not just our YouTube and our Instagram TV where we're pumping out content every day, but it also encompasses our core board members who are dedicated to pushing out the messaging as well. And so, you know, we can go from perhaps on our side averaging between 2 and 10,000 a view, and then have someone, you know, post a video as well, long form video interview like this, or something to celebrate, you know, a mission going on, and we can get 50,000, 100,000 views on that in a few days. And so, you know, we, in the last 3 weeks, I think we have gotten 500,000 new views on just self-generated content that we're creating now, sort of building out days of the week programming, all in the name of being able to present a sustainable lifestyle, and at the same time create moments for our audience, and more specifically for our talents audiences, to learn about really important things. We have a partnership with Harvard Sea Change, where we're, you know, putting professors and scientists on talking about correlations between climate and COVID right now. We have a partnership with the Knowledge Society in Canada, where young, you know, innovators, I'm talking about 16, 17-year-olds, are on talking about ideas that they have to save the world. We had an incredible conversation with a young girl who is using stem cells to recreate red meat just from 1 or 2 DNA strands. They, you know, with the right sort of resources in terms of economics, they can feed a million of people with 1 DNA strand, which is remarkable. Wow. Same exact tendons and blood and everything. This isn't like beyond or impossible. This is like the real deal. And it's those sort of breakthroughs, as well as promoting Artists for the Amazon, and, you know, doing everything we can to shed light on the situation down south, that really are the reason that we're strengthening what we're doing with our content and with our digital community.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for all of the work you do. And obviously it's so important that we have, you know, Hollywood and entertainment aligning in solidarity with, you know, everybody and everything that's happening, especially in the Amazon rainforest right now. And we're so happy that EMA is partnered with our campaign, Artists for Amazonie, as a founding partner. Tayana, so I'm a huge proponent of project-based immersive learning. Can you talk to us about the different ways that people learn, and how art can open the heart and the mind in ways that, you know, straight facts and academia cannot?
Good question, Julia. Absolutely. I think it's no accident that the word art is contained within the word heart. It's my view that art, with very few exceptions, is a universal language. So what better medium to unite people across the globe and to really speak to our most basic DNA? You know, I think it started with the heartbeat, and then it went to the drum beat. And when we incorporate music into our messages, there's something very primal, I believe, that is ignited in all of us. And it helps us just be emotionally available to hear the message. So that's one thing. And then the other thing I'd love to speak to is different types of intelligences. There are some people who love to read facts, and they'll read lots of them, but most people aren't generally wired that way. I think about my partner, for example, who is also a filmmaker and happens to have dyslexia. It's not severe, but it's something he's had his whole life. He's not going to read a book of facts, but he will tune into a video. He will listen to a song, or, you know, look at a beautiful painting and get a message that way. And I think a lot of us have different ways that we learn. And so the more that we can use art in its various forms, like fashion design, and dance and music and on, painting murals. I think the broader our reach can be to really, really engage all different kinds of people. I think about Diego Rivera. That's who I'm thinking of in the 1920s in Mexico. And to communicate the importance of workers' rights, he started painting these huge murals. And so just the average person walking by might have a look and note that it's beautiful. But within that painting, if they look a little more deeply, there's a big message. So I guess the last thing I'll say is it's important for us to be excellent in our communication of art that will reach a broader audience.
Yes, that's so true. And actually through my activism, that's primarily how, we've been able to leverage and bring in people from all over is through art, and working particularly with John Quigley of Spectral Q and doing these human aerial art pieces. And I think that is such a compelling and important modality in trying to engage people into action. Speaking of different modalities, Stephen, so Extinction Rebellion, bread and butter is essentially nonviolent civil disobedience. It's really getting out there and using that as a form of expression of activism, of unrest. Can you talk to us about how utilizing nonviolent direct action is both an effective tool and a form of creative and artistic expression?
Yes, and I'm so glad you mentioned John Quigley, because it's such a perfect alignment with this panel and the work we're all describing. With ATOSA and others, including Extinction Rebellion Los Angeles, but most notably Extinction Rebellion Youth, we put on we took an action, and the action we took was at the Hollywood sign, and the day we did this was the day before the Oscars. And we knew that there'd be a lot of media in town, so it was a great opportunity to take the Hollywood sign. And we have an amazing group of youth that hired buses and brought youth from all over Los Angeles and gathered up at the Hollywood sign, and with the immense talents of John Quigley, in human form, with hundreds of people involved, we spelled out the letters "Wake Up" across just below the sign. And then John brought up his brilliant drone work, and we have an image of Hollywood Wake Up. Now, for those of you on this call, you're already woke, you're here. But let's just say, I think it'd be safe to say that for most of us, we are so yearning to bring forward more awareness to the crisis in the Amazon, the immense crisis. And with ATOSA, ATOSA brought Sonia Guajajara, a tribal leader from the Amazon, with her, and we had this brilliant opportunity to capture attention and to make some really holy noise, if you will, and get a whole lot of people thinking about what's going on both in the Amazon and elsewhere. And it was a beautiful day and a perfect example of what we're calling artivism, bringing creative work into waking people up. And we got massive media coverage and all of that. To a larger effect, and I'll try to be very brief, we've also, with Amazon Watch, we collaborated at Extinction Rebellion on a short film called Guardians of Life with Joaquin Phoenix and Coriana Kilcher and Rosario Dawson and others. And we have also, as XRLA, we've stormed the Brazilian consulate and demanded a meeting with the consul general and got one. We see creative action as a liberatory opportunity for many of us who have been experiencing COVID, for example, and of course, the climate and ecological emergency. There's just such a sense of despair that most people are suffering, and they just don't know how to step out of that despair. And what we've discovered, I would say both locally and globally, is that nonviolent direct action, civil disobedience, non-cooperation regenerative action, these regenerative culture, these are all profoundly healing, enabling, empowering, liberating forces. So that's what we're about. And we're having a great time doing it. And thank you.
Awesome. So when I was 22, I did a tree sit. I climbed into a tree to try and protect 12 acres of old growth in Los Angeles, and got arrested, spent the night in jail. Yes, John was involved with that too. The most powerful experience I think I've ever had in my life is crossing that line and really following your moral compass and standing strong. And I just think, I mean, I wish for everybody to have that experience. It's really transformative. So thank you for helping, to create those opportunities for young people and any people. Okay, so switching gears a little bit. I'm also a huge proponent of the Green New Deal. I love that this is being talked about. Thank you, AOC. Thank you, Bernie. Thank you, everybody who's elevating this idea. Atosa, what is your vision for a Green New Deal for the Amazon rainforest?
The work that I'm doing in Ecuador and Peru is with the Sacred Headwaters Initiative. It's a coalition that's come together over the last 3 years that includes 25 indigenous nations, an area of 74 million acres, so like the size of Oregon. Leo's is part of that. And it's basically working with a number of NGOs that have been basically partners to indigenous peoples for all that time. We're coming together to really envision a future, a ecological U-turn, an ecological transition that really sees the forest differently, starts with seeing the forest differently. And all of the things that are destroying the Amazon come from a mindset that sees the forest as an empty place to extract resources, which is really the forest and all of its abundance. Basically kill it, chop it down, transform it into capital, and to basically be driven by an economic system that's life blind. The idea that an economic system that's really seeking just GDP growth and extractivism and just extraction of resources, which only benefit few, shipping the resources of the Amazon to mostly raw materials like gold and oil and cattle and beef to other countries, receiving money to then provide for their populace. This economic model is at the root of all of our planetary demise. It's basically the primacy of capital. What we want is an economic system that it's basically based on a primacy of the web of life, the primacy of life, that life-centric economic system that is basically honors and values and sees the value of the forest as these abundant, regenerative storehouses of incredible wealth. The wealth that we just have to see the wealth differently. Right now, the wealth is just this money. And so this conversation with indigenous elders, wisdom keepers, activists, economists, thought leaders, scientists, has been going on for the last 3 years on the Sacred Headwaters, and we're working on an alternative vision for a bioregional plan for the Sacred Headwaters that is really putting indigenous people's life plans, their holistic plans for their territories at the center. And also the idea that biodiversity has to be protected. This area of the Amazon happens to harbor the most biodiverse part of the Amazon. And so in terms of species diversity, and it's all threatened. All of this area we're talking about, doing nothing means we're going to go down a path of drilling for oil and mining for gold and copper and those, basically palm oil and cattle. This is basically that we're trying to change that vision. So we've been putting forth well-being indicators, borrowing from indigenous worldview, which honors buen vivir, this idea that we really seek harmony, cooperation, and collective well-being, that we don't march to the beat of, we don't march to the beat of growth and economic and jobs. We march to the beat of, well-being, health, and happiness. The idea of Amazon basin being this incredible flourishing ecosystem full of diversity. How do we build an economic system that is aligned with that diversity, aligned with life. And so we've been looking at so many exciting ideas. The solutions are actually in the forest already. The indigenous people have the solution. They're saying to us, change the goals of the system. Don't focus on development and growth, focus on flourishing. And this idea of qualitative growth, like people want to flourish, ecosystems need to flourish. And, the idea of being aligned with economies that focused on the well-being of the people instead of exports, economies that focus on regeneration, reforestation, biodiversity conservation. The fact that only 5% of all the species in the Amazon have even been studied, 5% of plant species in the Amazon have even been documented, that we're basically destroying this huge library, this huge wealth. So from that mindset, we're dreaming a vision, an alternative vision that's, lifting up the voices and the visions of indigenous peoples. It's very exciting. I call it the flourishing Amazon goals, and we're working on basically what that means. And it needs to happen at the level of the entire planet. We're just helping birth something that needs to happen globally, this global New Deal, looking at, wealth differently, looking at goals of the system as well-being. And here we are in COVID, working on our own survival. And, when we're reflecting on our existential threat that we're facing around our own survival, we really need to look at that planetary survival and that global planetary health as our new compass, well-being and health becoming the drumbeat that the economic livelihoods of all of our nations can be redesigned around. So that's.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing, shedding light on that vision. And I hope that idea can be transmitted, to economies around the world, especially as our world becomes more and more globalized economically and politically and socially. So I want to keep going with more questions, but we are going to first introduce this really powerful film, River of Gold. We're just going to get a little sneak clip of it and hear from the director, and then we're going to go back into questions, and I have a burning question for Leo when we get back.
I'm Sarah DuPont, the founder and president of the Amazon Aid Foundation. For many years, Amazon Aid has collaborated with artists worldwide to harness the power of the arts to inspire global change to save the Amazon. Our network of artists, including photographers, filmmakers, musicians, dancers, and fine artists, have given their talents to showcase the beauty and the destruction of this critical ecosystem. Now, more than ever, we must expand our networks to partner with other organizations and individuals worldwide to share and align missions to protect the Amazon and the critical forest defenders who call it home. We are all better together. The Tipping Point, the short video you're about to see, features footage from our award-winning film River of Gold, which documents the apocalyptic deforestation, destruction, and poisoning of the Amazon and its peoples through unregulated and illicit gold mining. Sadly, during this pandemic, the rise of gold mining and land grabbing has increased throughout the Amazon basin, compromising the Amazon and its indigenous people. It is now an emergency. All hands on deck. For more information about how you can support the Amazon Emergency Fund and learn more about River of Gold and the Amazon Aid Foundation, go to amazonaid.org.
A tipping point, a crossroads, a last chance. That's how many describe this critical moment for the Amazon. In the pursuit of gold, perhaps we see this global crisis reflected most clearly, expressed in a single word: greed. Will our greatness be overshadowed by our ravenous hunger for what is superficial? Will we choose a world that exploits the innocent, a world of greed, of degradation, of destruction that can ultimately threaten our very existence? Or will we decide that the real riches are in living together on this planet, in harmony and with respect for all living things?
Amazon. Leo, I'd love to hear more about your project, the HUA Project, and your mission is so important of providing job opportunities for Indigenous women and jobs that are not extractive. Can you talk to us about this project? And also, I just would love to hear from you, like, why it's so important that Indigenous people's voices are heard, that that Indigenous peoples get to speak for themselves versus have somebody speak for them.
Oh, thank you. The HAKU project for me is a social justice vehicle in which we explore the intersections of advocacy, capacity building, and storytelling. I think, and the storytelling, like, and the power of the storytelling to engender collective awakening for Indigenous people and for the world. The HAKU project, we work on creating jobs for indigenous women across the Ecuadorian Amazon, where a lot of the people in the Amazon, a lot of women especially, that they're the heads of the household and they don't have any income. So we elaborate a plan in which we create jobs for the women inside the communities so they don't have to leave their community and become urban dwellers in the cities, or like low income jobs in the city, or poverty. And in that way they can stay in the community, pass ancestral knowledge to their children, and take care of the forest. As well as we work with youth and storytelling as a way to shift individual limitations for people, for viewers, for storytellers. I feel like for indigenous people in general, other people have used our stories, and have not, and we have not been able to have our own platform in which our voices can be heard about what is the situation in the Amazon, how do we want to tell our story, and in which platforms, in which ways, what happened in after the, like, for activists, for example, and like climate change activists, we hear a lot about like Greta Thunberg and what she's doing, and we don't hear about the real voices and the real solutions of indigenous people who are working at the forefront of the fight in Brazil and Ecuador, indigenous people all around the globe who are fighting for their lives, who are fighting for the planet, who are fighting for their communities. That's why I think it's very important to create a platform and listen to what indigenous people have to say about the protection of the planet, and why is it so important. And I just wanted to mention something about the Green New Deal that you said. I think this is a time where governments should invest money towards green jobs, green, like low decarbonized transportation system, local farms. We have to feed the cities, but we have to rechange and reimagine a new world. with this new Green Deal, let's imagine a new world in which we can collaboratively work with indigenous people in the cities, and just start from zero, like zero waste, create green jobs, like new energy, decarbonize our economies, stop fossil fuel extraction, and listening to indigenous people and work collaboratively around the world towards, this new world that we all want, and together strengthen like a human symbiosis um, for collective awakening.
Yes, yes. So for people who want to hear these Amazon stories, I understand you have a platform. How can people, listen to these stories? Where do they go?
Yeah, go on our website. It's called HUAamazon.org. Then
Okay.
you can find out about our video labs that we do about healing and trauma release for indigenous people. Also, the work that we do with the communities and capacity building, and the storytelling is called Amazon Stories. And we're doing a program visiting in the individual projects across the Amazon, and talk to different like leaders, and what are the projects are doing in order to protect and defend the indigenous territories.
Got it. Thank you so much for your work. So I could continue to talk to all of you for hours. I believe we are running short on time. So I want to encourage everybody to check out our event on the 28th, Artists United for Amazonia, the Protectors. It's on the 28th, and we have some amazing headliners, everybody from Santana to Morgan Friedman to Jane Fonda, to Peter Gabriel, a lot of incredible Brazilian artists as well. So we, want to continue the conversation there. And thank you, young entertainment activists, for everything you're doing. Please continue submitting your art projects, and we're so grateful that they're supporting the Amazon Emergency Fund, which I believe is also listed on the screen. But thank you all for your time and for your activism, and we love you all. Mwah.
And then, then you can press your record too.
Okay, awesome. I'm just gonna make sure that it's the right angle.
When I see
Yeah, I think we're going.
with Lydia. 10:50 should you go in?
So how did you first hear about Extinction Rebellion?
I lived in a town about 20 minutes from Paradise, which is the town that burned down the Camp Fire.
A few years ago, I was on a road trip of sorts, and I was in Plaquemines Parish, and it is the area in North America that is most immediately affected by climate change.
I personally have asthma, and it's mainly because of the pollution here in LA. And I didn't really think much of it growing up, seeing that it was something that was just standard since we just had pollution in LA. That's just what it was. There was nothing really questionable about it.
I grew up with the knowledge that humans were damaging the planet.
People say this all the time, and it's true. They lose a football field of land a day. It just sort of shuffs off into the Gulf of Mexico.
Those fires that I saw were not normal.
A few years ago, when fires kept happening, I had to skip school a lot because of my asthma and the smoke. This isn't normal. I've lived in LA my entire life, and I've never had to evacuate my house. I've never had to skip school because I couldn't breathe if I went outside.
They were so scary and so much bigger and more intense and fast moving, like people could not escape.
I was just going around talking to fishermen, people who live there, people whose lives are, as all of our lives are, tied up in the land that they live on, and they're seeing it vanish every day.
And I saw those happening and watched my friends posting about them and was just distraught that the places that I knew were already being affected were already being wiped out by climate fuel disruption.
This is full blown because of the climate crisis, and I really needed to take action.
So I've been aware of this for a long time. Haven't really known what to do about it.
I first heard about Extinction Rebellion after the original branch in the UK shut down London.
I started getting wind of Extinction Rebellion when it launched, and I found it very exciting.
I was looking for a group that's involved in addressing the climate crisis.
I heard about Extinction Rebellion from a podcast. I remember I was driving in my car, kids in the back seat on my way to the post office.
Well, I first heard of Extinction Rebellion generally well over a year ago when the stuff in Britain was very, very active.
So I went to a meeting in one of those groups, and it so happened that at that meeting, the group had invited 2 people from XRLA to talk. One of the speakers from XRLA said, "What we do is nonviolent direct action. We're looking for people who don't mind being arrested." And I thought, that's the group for me.
I saw there was an action at Universal Studios a while back in April 2019, I believe.
We got helicopters, we got a lot of mass media on that one. That was a very powerful, very brave, heroic action in our early days with relatively few of us, with just the idea that we cooked up in somebody's garage and then we went out and did it.
I saw Extinction Rebellion as the only organization with people of privilege like myself that was willing to make people uncomfortable, including people like myself, because direct action is not comfortable, but neither is climate change.
Direct action is showing up physically and creatively.
It is an offense in both meanings of the word. It's an offensive strategy, and it is offensive, and it's meant to be. And you're going to go do something disruptive. You're going to take risks to do it.
You put your body on the line and you take some kind of direct action to stop injustice and try to make the world a slightly better place.
I think we've all become very accustomed to collectivism and petition signing. It's different when you show up as a human in a space with other humans in that space.
When we look throughout history, we see that a lot of changes that were made were from ordinary people who decided to rise up and demand change.
You will find so many examples of huge changes that have come about, funnily enough, not by politicians and governments leading the change, because so often they're the last ones to get behind it.
I grew up learning in history class about the civil rights movement and how powerful that was. And when we look at the number of people participating, we don't need 100% actively participating or even 50%. It's really a small number of people in the scheme of things who can create massive change.
Direct action means to me no fear and challenging someone's thinking to evolve and to change the situation.
Just look back. Apartheid in South Africa fell. Civil rights under Martin Luther King. There's so many examples. The union struggles. The history of humanity, in a way, is the history of direct action.
So when we're planning actions with XR, we usually start from a point of what's our goal? What would we like to see happen? Why are we doing this action?
The larger group is composed of smaller working groups. There's a lot going on which is important and which is a lot of fun.
So we meet, we get together, and our tactical group will form a street plan of exactly where we're going to be performing the action, and our arts team will then come together and come up with an arts component for that.
All of the parts that it takes to get to a really vibrant
and beautiful direct action experience takes so much back work and so much support from so many people. You have the artists who are going and creating these beautiful objects or costumes. So you have the people who are doing outreach and making sure that people know. You have people who are creating the short videos. There's just so many different roles.
You know, you escalate your actions according to what works and what doesn't. If you see that the initial actions don't work, you escalate and you take it up a notch.
So in January and February of this year, we started launching a campaign against Chase Bank.
Chase Bank's the #1 funder of fossil fuel companies in the world.
The way that we executed the actions at the banks was very, very fulfilling and fun.
We invoked our indigenous federal rights to pray, proclaimed and affirmed in 1978 by American Indian movement. We charged J.P. Morgan Chase with the crimes of genocide, ecocide, and femicide. We must divest now.
We were building a snake, this 20-foot long snake that was going to be dancing around the Chase Bank representing the oil pipelines.
We must end the criminal financing against humanity and against Earth Mother and all of our relatives. We must divest now. Divest now. Divest now.
We get different standers-by who are wondering why is there a big gathering of people with instruments and banners and gadgets and everything in the parking lot, and then you start to approach those people and you start to do some outreaching, and some people spontaneously actually join in.
It's hard to describe an XR action. An XR action is like all of the emotions that you have about climate and climate change coming into like a physical manifestation of the Red Brigade and all of these banners and the boat and everything else that we bring out that is not just symbolic, but like really, I think, speaks to our rage, our pain, our hope, but also the rage and pain, hope of everyone else.
We need to be disruptive. We need to draw attention to this crisis. What does it better than a pink boat and 11 people blocking a street?
The day before the Oscar Awards, we were protesting at the Hollywood sign because we were demanding that Hollywood wake up to the climate emergency.
We staged a whole protest and march and synchronized dying. We were planning that for a month or so. Everyone was just doing everything. We were all trying to chip in any way possible.
We had a Red Rebel Brigade that was the first youth Red Rebel Brigade, and we had Sonia Guajajara, who's the Amazonian leader who joined us.
Hollywood has a huge global platform, and if it uses its platform for good, then this will create the societal change that we need.
Our first demand is for Hollywood to wake up. We need you to understand the climate crisis and acknowledge that we need to take action immediately.
Nós indígenas
It's important to know that indigenous peoples are doing all we can to defend life, to defend democracy, to defend the earth. As we are taking this leadership, we are inviting all of you to band together for this fight for our Mother Earth.
When I joined up in last June, I knew I needed to do something just to live with myself, but I didn't realize that it was going to be so rewarding and empowering.
The juxtaposition of the lonely car ride to arriving to see the rest of XRLA is an enormous sort of leap for your spirits. Here I go, leaving my family to go do a thing because I'm terribly worried about the future. And then arriving at the action and hearing the voices of so many other people and seeing a lot of people who are excited to voice their concerns and excited to do it in a joint effort, to do it as a group, to amplify.
We live in dark times. We live in very dark times. It can be hard to find hope.
When I joined Extinction Rebellion, I just found a sense of purpose in my life, that I was part of this gigantic group of people who are fighting for the exact same things that I'm fighting for, a more just and equitable world.
But there is hope. And that hope comes from good people joining together and having those beginning conversations.
I used to think of activists in separate categories. Activists who fight for women's rights, activists who fight for animal rights, activists who fight for social justice. And once I joined the climate movement, I realized that all activists were fighting for very similar things, and it's all related to the climate emergency.
So this is an invitation to a community circle and to basically rise to your day in a new and renewed culture that you get to imagine and create with so many others of like mind, however, of many different strengths and many different talents.
If you want to take action, if you just want to show solidarity, if you want to create, if you want to converse, learn, find comfort, all of those things are here.
Joining a community, joining an activist community like Extinction Rebellion will help you feel less alone, will help you feel empowered in a way you've never felt empowered before, will help you see the strength that you have and the skills that you have that you can bring.
We are eager to welcome people. There's lots of important work to do. You will find it satisfying, you will meet some amazing people, and you're going to have lots of opportunities for interesting adventures.
It's like if you ever had a really good after-school club, but this time you're actually doing it for a greater cause.
And there are dogs.
Every single person is needed and every person is valued in the climate movement. We all have different strengths, and those strengths are beautiful when put together.
Like, real talk, if we all don't do this, we're going to fail. So we need you.
According to research, 70% of adults spend almost 3 to 5 hours per day online. 80% of those hours logged are on a mobile device.
We want to psychologically figure out how to manipulate you as fast as possible and then give you back that dopamine hit.
They own our data, and they own our eyeballs, and they own our attention span, and increasingly our brand preferences. You and I are the good being sold.
It's also why they've eviscerated so many privacy standards, getting consumers to give up their personal private information.
We have created tools that are ripping apart the social fabric of how society works.
Graphics powered by Hovercast.
Streaming powered by Wirecast.